totally the floor is yours. You can start your presentation.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Do I share my screen?
Sure, yeah.
Yes,
Just,
yes.
I'm trying to find the
Yeah,
the the
just take
the,
your
the
time, it's
place
fine. Take your
to
time. Oh,
share my
I'm
screen.
going to off my screen first, and then you can
Oh, okay,
start sharing your, yeah.
okay. All right. Okay.
Okay.
Is that available?
Yeah, we can see it now.
Okay,
You
we can
can
all
make
see
it
it, yeah?
big. You can
Yeah,
make it
sure.
big
I
screen, and then
will,
we can start.
yeah, okay. All right. I think, yeah, that's um, a pretty long introduction from my fellow comrade, Kim Kong, uh, from Cambodia. So I think all of you can hear me clearly. Is that fine? Is that all right?
Yes, yes.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, we
Okay,
can
good.
hear you well.
Right. Okay, thank you. Okay. So we are actually personally, of course, King Kong and I are connected, related, like what he has mentioned. But we are of course from different countries, and I take it as a challenge for me to present um, on Cambodia, because I've always been doing research, okay, on language policy and planning in education as well, education policy related to my own country. Of course, I'm from Malaysia, as well as around the region, which includes ASEAN and Southeast Asia in general. So as what he has pointed out, I'm looking at language ideologies, okay, in Cambodia, because I find it quite interesting and fascinating in the context of Cambodia. And I hope all of us, it's a sharing session actually. So I hope we will at least, pick up a thing or two, and I feel free to provide some comments and feedback on this seminar later on. And as what he has mentioned, I'm senior lecturer at Language Academy from University of Technology, Malaysia. So I'm based in Johor Bahru, which is near Singapore. Okay, so that's a brief introduction about myself, and I'm also an honorary fellow at UQ, which is my alma mater. And thank you very much to Cambodian Education Forum for giving me this platform to speak on this topic, okay, which I hope is of interest to many of you here. So just a brief outline of my presentation. So firstly, I will talk about language ecology in Cambodia. So I will also touch on language ideologies. And lastly, I will look at language policies in education, as well as challenges and issues, right, related to language education policies in the context of Cambodia. Last but not least, I have some suggestions. And of course, these are also ways forward, ongoing, as well as in the future. So as we all know, Cambodia is the country, right, sandwiched between Thailand, Laos over to the north, and then Vietnam to the right. So of course, geography also plays a very important role. Okay, when we talk about.
Okay, I'm
Uh,
sorry to interrupt. I still see the first slide. Can you like
oh,
make the slide full screen, and then we can see it? Because now I'm still seeing the
okay,
first. I'm not sure
okay. Because
others.
sorry, because mine is on the second. Let me try again.
Okay,
Does it work now?
so no, I think you can stop sharing and share again.
Okay. Maybe
Yeah,
I
that
just
will
stop
work.
sharing.
Yeah,
Okay, so I've stopped sharing.
and then do it
Uh,
again. I think it will work. Yeah.
okay, where are we? We are here. I will try it out and see whether it works.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Um, Sorry about that. Can you see the second screen now?
Yeah, I can see, but can you make it big, like
Make full
full
screen.
screen? Yeah.
I've made it big now. Is it okay? Is it moving?
No,
It's not.
it's
It's not.
still
No.
Yeah.
Oh, it's
it's
still
still
not moving,
stuck
huh?
in there, and yeah.
Oh, okay. Uh, let me see because
Can
it's moving. It's moving on my screen. Okay. Wait. I will stop sharing
can you
again.
press F?
Sorry. Hello?
Yeah, it's gone. The slide's gone, right?
Yeah. I will have to share it again.
Okay.
Entire screen. Okay. Do you get it?
Yeah, I can see now. See the slide, but
Okay. Do
can you make
uh,
it big? Now it's still small. It's like we
can
can
you
still
see the slides
see.
moving? Can you see the slides moving?
No, it's not yet.
Oh, really? Uh, or sometimes we have to present it that way, like this.
Okay. Yeah.
Is it okay?
Can you press F5 and it will make it bigger?
Okay. Does it work now?
No.
Can you see the other screens?
It is not. It's not.
Oh, it's not
It's
moving,
still
huh?
not. Can you send
Okay.
that slide to me so
Yeah,
I can show it on my end? Yeah.
I will send it to you right now,
Yeah.
and then
It seems like stuck from your side.
yeah. Sorry about that. I'll try to send it to you.
Send to Facebook, right?
Okay, I can send it to you on Facebook as well. Okay. Okay, I've sent it, so it's on your
Okay. Let me
Facebook.
open it first.
Okay, and see whether it works on your side. Okay.
Just wait a few seconds. It's
Okay.
loading.
All right. I hope it works. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay, wait. I'm trying to share it from my. Okay, you can close your and I'm sharing mine. Can stop sharing. Okay, let me try from my
Okay.
side.
Okay.
Okay, now I think it's
Yeah.
coming.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
does it work?
Yes. Okay. Yes, it works.
Okay,
Yeah.
you can
Yeah.
start. You can continue. Yeah, thank
Okay.
you.
Sorry about that. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So we are now on the second screen. Yes, that's the one. Okay. Thank you. Sorry about this technical issue. That yeah, we'll go straight back and talk about this. And of course, that's the Cambodian flag. And I think understanding the ecology, ideologies, and policy is very important because it helps us, kind of like frame the the whole framework, okay, in policy, in language as well as education, okay, particularly in this case, the context of Cambodia. Okay, next. Okay, yeah, here we talk about the ecology. Okay, based on the latest statistics, I think there are around 17.3 million people in Cambodia. The Khmer, I think I pronounced it correctly, I hope, or in other words, Cambodians, they account for the vast majority, okay, of the population. And you can see it in this two pie charts, okay. So the population, of course, a majority are Khmer, and they speak the language which is also called Khmer, and then that's 96% of them. And if you look at in terms of religion, it's also kind of correlates, so around 97%. So you can see now that the people, okay, the language as well as the religion are all in line, right? Kind of connected in the context of Cambodia. Having said that, there are also some ethnic minorities, of course, include the Chinese, Vietnamese due to its close proximity with Vietnam and also the history with Vietnam. And then there are some Muslims, okay, for those who might not know, they are called Cham, and they're also called, interestingly, Cham Malays. So from where I come from, I'm in Malaysia. So the majority in Malaysia are actually Malays, right? So, and of course, Laos, bordering up north. And then there are also many, okay, various indigenous population in the rural highlands of Cambodia. If we have time, I'll touch a little bit about the indigenous population and their languages as well. So there are altogether 27 based on Ethnologue and Britannica, 27 recognized or living languages being spoken or used in Cambodia. So what's interesting about Cambodia is that in terms of ecology, is that it produces a kind of homogeneous group of people, which forms the majority, which is quite unique in the context of Southeast Asia, because as we know, within Southeast Asia, Malaysia, Thailand, Philippines, Myanmar, Singapore, and so on. We are the rest of Southeast Asia are actually quite diverse in terms of languages. Indonesia, of course, needless to say, and in terms of ethnicity, in terms of people, religions as well. But in the context of Cambodia, it's quite homogeneous. So that produces a strong sense of national identity, okay, which is one of the most important things in Cambodia. And of course, just a little bit of history. The Khmer Empire, okay, used to be the largest, okay, in Southeast Asia, but of course, not many people read or study about that, okay, from the 11th until the 13th century. So it used to rule almost the large parts of Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, as well as Vietnam. Okay, lasted between 802 and 1431. Okay, so that's a brief history as well as some ecological context of Cambodia. Okay, next. Next, we'll look at the Khmer language, of course. So the Khmer language, I've done a little bit of research. Of course, you guys know better than me. Central Khmer or the Standard Khmer is actually the official language in Cambodia, right? It's also taught and used in all, okay, Cambodian schools, particularly public schools, and of course used by the media. And this Central Khmer is spoken through the Central Plain, okay, encompassing the northwest and central provinces, okay. So this language has its roots in the Austro-Asiatic language family. So close to 90%, okay, or of Khmer speakers actually in Cambodia. And there are some segments, pockets of speakers in other parts, for example, in Vietnam, in Thailand, and Laos, okay? But generally around 18 million speakers speak Khmer as the mother tongue, okay? So Khmer is, of course, used in the professional contexts, as well as social contexts in Cambodia, like in government administration, all levels of education, and of course, nowadays in social media too. Okay, so we can see that only 2.9% of people in Cambodia regard local, or I would say indigenous languages as their mother tongue, okay? A large part or a majority, of course, regard it as the mother tongue. Okay, next. We look at the ideologies. Now that we have done the ecological context, we understand the background, the geography, and also a bit of history of Cambodia. We look at the language ecologies in Cambodia. So I will focus on, of course, not all languages, but I will try to look into Khmer, English, of course, French, Mandarin, as well as other foreign languages, and then a little bit about indigenous languages, okay, if we have the time. So I will look into the social political as well as social cultural ideologies, okay, surrounding these languages. Some unique about Cambodia, but the rest are also similar ideologies, being practiced or actually in existence, right, in other parts of Southeast Asia or even Asia Pacific in general. So I think I put here managing, okay, contesting ideologies. I think more often when you look at ideologies, then we say, yeah, we know there are all these ideologies in this country. So what, right? So as policymakers, as policy planners, as language implementers, as education practitioners, teachers, and stakeholders. So what we have to do is actually to manage, right, all these contesting ideologies. Okay, it's very important, but it's a very difficult thing to do, and that's why I say the word is balancing. Okay, we have to balance between local, national, and global demands. Okay, in this case, at the local level, we're looking at identity. Okay, so language to a certain extent symbolizes one's identity as well as culture, right? Or in other words, there is a sentimental value attached to it. Well, if we look at a national context or a state level, then there are other considerations and other ideologies, of course, which are important to them in terms of unity. So we're looking at nation building, unity in diversity, getting people to be united through a common language, for example. And then, of course, uniformity as well, in the sense that we all share the same national identity. We have local identity, and then we have a national identity. We share the same language, sometimes even the same costume, a same way of thinking, same flag, etc. Okay, so it's part of that nation building ideology as well. And then, of course, for the national context, language is also important for development. So when we talk about development, it's also about personal development, it's about national socio-economic development, it's about political development, cultural development, educational development, and so on. Okay. And then when we talk about global, of course, we all know in the context of Cambodia, as I pointed out, 17 million people, right? It's not really a very big country in terms of population. So that's why, no man is an island. If we can't beat them, we join them, So hold on to that thought. I will come back to that. If we can't beat them, we join them. So what does it mean, right? So that means going global. Okay, so we have to, like it or not, we have to face it, right? We have to, all of us, are part of this era of globalization. So there are demands for mobility, demands to move around, demands for in technological exchange, business, communication, abilities, opportunities worldwide, overseas, higher education, and so on, right? So all those are global demands. In other words, we cannot just work in silos or just stay in one country and survive that way. I think it doesn't really work that way nowadays. Okay, and then of course English, right, and Khmer dominate, right, the language ecological spaces in Cambodian societies, even though there are other languages at play as well. Okay, so I think next we can look into the Khmer language, as I pointed out a little bit here and there. It is, I just use it as a language. I think it's a linguistic identity of Cambodia. It is, of course, a national identity of Cambodia as well. It's one of those things that I think Cambodians hold dearly to. And then of course, Cambodians have its own writing system, and I've done my research, and I have some Cambodian friends. It is also among one of the toughest languages to learn in the world. Okay, so and among the oldest languages in the world as well. So it also has some influence from I think languages in the older years. Okay, and it's used as a means of instruction in education, as pointed out just now, official language, of course. And we look at law. Okay, so Cambodia actually it is in the constitution of the Kingdom of Cambodia, right? Article 5 in 1993 states that the official language and script is Khmer, right? So it is stated clearly there. And then Article 69 as well, right, stating that the state shall protect and promote, okay, this language, Khmer language, as required. So you see, it's pretty strong words there, right? Okay, and I just put that stating that it's really non-negotiable, and it's considered one of the most important, I think, national symbols. I think it ranks alongside Angkor Wat, maybe. Okay, and of course, it's for nation building, and it's a language of identity. Okay, national identity particularly, and perhaps for most of them also a personal and social identity as well as cultural. Okay, next. And of course, in the context of Cambodia, I think close to 90% now of Cambodian adults are actually literate, at least in Khmer language. So we can see that it is definitely a very important language. Of course, it goes through education, and you need it, for development in the context of Cambodia. Then when we look at why is there a need to learn foreign languages, if Khmer itself is so important, and it looks like Khmer might be enough, right? But if you look at the context of Cambodia, many foreign languages have been learned over the years. Okay, and there is an acute need, right, for Cambodians to explore beyond just a Khmer language. Okay, but of course, not at the expense of Khmer. So I think based on my research, perhaps others will definitely know more than me as Cambodians. I can see that one global phenomena would probably be the spread of English amongst others. I mean, of course, there are other kinds of trends globally as well, but including globalization and so on. But the spread of English, I think, is the key here. So when I say the spread of English, I'm looking at it from, I think there are three key moments, or three key aspects that we have to look at that kind of propels the spread of English among Cambodians, or in other words, motivates the Cambodian people to learn and to realize the importance of English. I think that the first one is actually Cambodian entrance into ASEAN. Okay, as we all know, Cambodia joined ASEAN in 1993. So it was, until today, it's still the last country to date to be admitted into ASEAN. So as we know, English is the working language of ASEAN, right? So I think prior to that, and of course after that, or sorry, Cambodia gained acceptance in ASEAN in 1999. Sorry, not 93. Sorry, and then what I mean is that, is for the first time in the history of Cambodia, perhaps, that there is a need to go global. Okay, there is a need to at least engage with people, then regional neighbors. So and one way to do that is perhaps through English, right? Because English is the working language of ASEAN, and then English is kind of like the gateway, right, for international communication as well as intercultural communication and so on. Of course, there are other things like business, economy, and so on. And that brings us to the second, I think, major aspect, event, okay, that kind of made English so important in the context of Cambodia, which is Cambodia's entrance in 2004 into a World Trade Organization. Okay, so that kind of signals, right, Cambodia's integration, right, into the international community formally. Of course, we know that if we can't beat them, we join them. So that's why we join all these international organizations for wider opportunities, and later on we'll see kind of, in a way, countries are interdependent nowadays. We'll look at it in the next few slides as well. And then I think that WTO, World Trade Organization, of course, is for business, for trade, for commerce, for communication, including education and so on. And the last one, I think it's also very interesting because, of course, in Cambodia, although the country may be, small in terms of population, it does generate lots of revenue from tourism. Okay, and in other words, we call it tourism dollars. Money in terms of gained through tourism, right? US dollars, euros, and so on. So it's become a very important source of investment, in other words. So particularly people visiting Angkor Wat and Phnom Penh. Okay, so a lot of investment has gone into constructing hotels, resorts, right, and facilities, right, for the tourists. So as we all know, for tourism, then there is a need to learn foreign languages, right? Because most foreigners may not understand Khmer, as we pointed out just now. 90% of the speakers of Khmer are based in Cambodia itself, right? So that's why, you know, we have to look outward. And then, you know, Cambodia today, of course, starts getting tourists from various parts of the world, including Japan, China, you know, different parts of Asia, France, of course, Europe, even North America, US, Australia, and so on. So and one way, okay, to attract tourists is to speak, okay, the language of international tourism, perhaps. So maybe, you know, English, and to some extent French, or even Mandarin. So I think, but generally, English, right? So I think these are the three major impetus, okay? But of course, we also look at other factors as well. Let's move on to the next slide. So we'll see, okay? We'll continue a little bit about English. I mentioned a little bit. And then, but just for us to have a context, English has not been a very, very important language in Cambodia all the time, okay? Officially, I think it's starting from 1980s or even early 1990s. Prior to that, it was other languages, right? So I've mentioned the three major factors. But of course, you know, as I pointed out here, English actually replaced French, okay, quite early on. Of course, many of you would have read Thomas Clayton's work, right, on Cambodian language policy as well. So he mentioned a lot, right, about how English has replaced French due to various reasons. And maybe we have time to go into a little bit here and there, but of course, not fully, you know, everything that he has done about Cambodian language policy. And then it is also the main foreign language learned, right, as well as in diplomatic circles. Okay, so ever since then, in the 1990s or late 1980s, then it started being promoted, being encouraged, and rightly or wrongly, you know, Cambodians kind of see themselves as having better life, you know, and getting better jobs, okay, or go for higher education in English that gives them a better pay, you know, better salary, and so on. And you can see, of course, you know, there are a lot of street signs in Cambodia which are written bilingually. Okay, so I feel that that's mainly for tourism, right, in Khmer, and also for in English. Okay, so and of course it's widely spoken among young Cambodians. I wouldn't say old Cambodians, but among young Cambodians, I think, and businessmen, many of them are able to speak English nowadays. So it's really developing fast, Cambodia as a country. So I think that's very important. And of course today, you know, more and more publications and in education as well, increasingly in English, particularly in higher education. Okay, next we'll look into, um, uh, can we move on to the next slide, please? Okay, yeah. So next I will look into French a little bit. It's interesting because French used to be a major language in Cambodia, but now not anymore, right? So it was the language of governments between 1863 and 1953. So it's a fairly long time, 90 years. And then because if you look at India, for example, English was there, you know, the colonial times for around 400 years. So, and then English stays after, I mean, in the post-colonial or post-colonial world in India's context. But in Cambodia is interesting. You know, French was there until 1950s, and then after that, you know, apparently, you know, it's slowly losing steam and then losing to English in many ways. Well, it may still be spoken by, you know, very a small pocket of some older Cambodians. In fact, 3%, according to research I've read about in 2014. And then you can see up here, right? So only hundreds of Cambodians regard French as a mother tongue. And then, but of course, you know, Cambodia is a member of La Francophonie, and we can't deny that, okay? Because they're part of the part of Indo China, okay? So in a way, we can say that French, I've said Khmer is a language, or we call it linguistic identity, you know, and then English is like a global language, you know, language of development, language that gives you different forms of capital. So French is probably a language with a sentimental value, right? And to some extent, also, you know, language of tourism, and etc. Okay, so I think that's that. But then, we also have to understand that French, to some extent, is still used in some schools as well as higher education in Cambodia. And of course, there are still organizations that fund the spread of French in Cambodia. Okay, but okay, in the mid 1970s, it's also partly related to history. French was almost completely, eliminated, right, from Cambodia because mostly French educated Cambodians at that time were killed by the Khmer Rouge, right? This was based on a little bit of history that I've read, okay? And of course, Clayton, as I mentioned just now, problematizes the choice of Cambodia's language policy, particularly, mainly, the transition from French to English. Okay, so I think we can say that the revival of French, to some extent in Cambodia, it seemed to be a little bit stronger than in Vietnam or in Laos. Perhaps, because I mean nowadays it's slowly coming back a little bit because French-speaking population in Cambodia consists of returned refugees, right, from France as well as Quebec in Canada, as well as those who have studied in Francophone countries. Okay, next we look at another language, which is of course increasingly gaining popularity and importance particularly in the context of Cambodia. I find some interesting insights, when I research Cambodia. I find that 1/3 of Phnom Penh's city population are actually consisting of Chinese or consists of Chinese. So I think this is kind of interesting. But it is not something that is only confined to Cambodia, right? Throughout Southeast Asia, we have around 690 million people, okay, population. More than 100 or close to 120 million people within Southeast Asia have some form of connections to mainland China or their Chinese descendants, okay, so to speak, right? Um, and nowadays, you can see that the younger generation of Chinese Cambodians, they would like to not necessarily reconnect with their roots in China, but more towards learning Chinese, right? As a form of their another identity, as I mentioned just now, it's linguistic identity as well. But also more importantly, I think it is because Mandarin or Chinese is viewed largely as a language of business, okay, language of commerce, right? Particularly dealing with the rise of China as a Asian superpower, or perhaps it's already a global superpower, and will very soon might be the world's superpower. Okay, so and we can see here that it is also interesting to note that there are some Chinese language medium schools in Cambodia, and in these schools, Cambodian and Cantonese and Mandarin, sorry, are actually taught in these schools, right? And Chinese consisted of only a small number, the total population of Cambodia. But what's interesting is in the context of Phnom Penh city. Okay, so and of course the earliest record of Chinese being present in China was in the 13th century. Okay, as I put it here, just Chinese characters. I think it's fairly common. You can see that in China, particularly due to tourism, but also business. Okay, next. Okay, all right, yeah. So here I've done a little bit of research, but I have to mention that this situation is not confined only to Cambodia. Many countries in Africa, in South America, in the global South are also part of this kind of worldwide trend, So in the post-colonial world or newly independent countries, right? Um, uh, Countries are kind of dependent on developmental aid, development aid, and then they're dependent on donors, international NGOs, as well as education service providers. Okay, so what I'm saying here is that why do we need to learn foreign languages, right, in Cambodia? It's because we are all tied. We are tied to aid, to donors, to funders, to education providers, NGOs, and so on. And whenever there is this connection, whenever this kind of discourses occur, definitely it has to be done through a medium, and the medium of communication is often a foreign language, right? So in other words, if you can't beat them, we join them. And usually the language being used is English. But of course, to some extent, it might be French or increasingly Mandarin, Japanese, or Korean. So I think, we are all familiar with all these organizations, UNICEF, UNESCO, ASEAN, AusAid, and NGOs, right? USAID, American Embassy, British Council, all of them play an instrumental role. I think Canadian International Development Agency, European Union, and of course, you have to sit for TOEFL, IELTS. So all those also contribute to the spread of these foreign languages. So when you need to deal with them, when you need to go for higher education, when you need to get the aid and sustain those aids that you get from these donors, from these funders, usually they have we call strings attached. Like in one interview that I've had, with Professor Emeritus James Tollefson in the US, so he says that international aids or developmental aids usually come with strings attached. Okay, so normally you have to get textbooks, you have to go for teacher training, and then you have to learn the kind of language training, language courses as well. And more often than not, it's done through English and etc. So this, I think, it's also one very important factor, okay, that contributes, right, to the learning of foreign languages in Cambodia. And I think English is currently packaged as a kind of industry, okay, as a kind of commodity, right, to be sold to other countries, in this context, Cambodia, all right? And of course, we say that, it's because I think Cambodia as a country is still newly, I mean, it's kind of like a newly modern country. It's still developing, of course, very fast, developing rapidly. But it used to go through a process of reconstruction and redevelopment, right? Particularly after the Pol Pot regime. So I think that's why this development aid, international donors, NGOs, and service providers play such an instrumental role, right, in the context of Cambodia. And usually they do it through education and, of course, language. So next, we'll look into language policies in education. So I find that there are some pretty general trends, okay, that I see happening. And I have to say that all these trends that I've highlighted here are also happening in many parts of Southeast Asia, if not Asia Pacific, or even many parts of Global South. So generally, there is, of course, a great awareness about national languages. So, and national languages are spoken usually by the majority, and you need it for, unity, development, nation building, official functions, and so on. I've mentioned that, okay? But of course, I've also talked about the push for English, right? So I think, there is a trend, where earlier is better, is a kind of ideology, I call it a fallacy. So like the earlier you learn English, the better your outcome is. So based on studies, it doesn't necessarily work that way, but that's the kind of fallacy that people have, about uh, uh, education when it comes to English language education. And then more is better. In this case, you'll find that more and more courses or subjects are taught in English, and then English is mainly used as a medium of instruction in many private international schools. And then they increase the number of periods for English, and so on. So more is better. It's also, to a certain extent, a fallacy, because there are many other factors, okay, which kind of like are way more important, that should be considered and tackled first, okay, before you actually increase the periods of English and see desirable outcomes. And then when it comes to language and education planning, again, these are fairly common nowadays in many countries. And of course, it applies to Cambodia too. So at a primary level, there tends to be a focus on national language, in this case, Khmer. And then, of course, we also focus a little bit on mother tongue education, depending on the country. So later on, I will touch a little bit about indigenous language education policies in Cambodia. There have been some very progressive development initiated by, I think, one of the education ministers in Cambodia. right? And then at a secondary level, then there is a greater focus on national language and foreign language or additional language. And then, but sometimes, of course, in all schools now, in Cambodian context, I think throughout Southeast Asia also, English has been made a compulsory subject, or it has to be taught, in other words, at the primary level also, right? And then tertiary level, usually in Khmer, in the context of Cambodia, but nowadays also increasingly in English, okay? I'm talking about minimum instruction, okay? And then we look at some innovative solutions. So of course, we know that people know that, okay, national language Khmer is important. English is also necessary. So what do we do now, right? So sometimes we tend to go for localized content, right? Or even localized, maybe Cambodian English, So, and then we have curriculum content tailored for Cambodian speakers of English through the English as a lingua franca approach, right? ELF. And then, of course, we have CLEAR, which is content and language integrated learning, as well as dual language program or bilanguage programs, bilingual programs and so on. So these are some of the innovative solutions, including nowadays the trending topic will be translanguaging. And then if you look at private initiatives, I mentioned a lot of those. All of them have a stake, or they are basically education stakeholders who invest in language policy and education through teacher training, providing textbooks, okay, training of curriculum, assessment, pedagogy, and increasingly nowadays it's in terms of the proliferation of CEFR, okay, as a kind of framework for English language as well as other languages. Okay, and then if we look at indigenous minority languages, not much effort in education, but in the Cambodian societies, Cambodian Ministry of Education, there has been some work done in this because UNESCO has frequently used Cambodia as an example, as a success story, okay, when it comes to this, although it's generally still limited to certain regions in hinterlands and also limited to families and as a home language. Okay, next. Okay, so we look at teaching and learning of foreign languages in Cambodia. I've touched on a lot of this. Uh, 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 can we have the slide? Okay, yeah. So yeah, basically, there's a kind of dominance of monolingual foreign language education. Of course, Andy Kirkpatrick mentioned this. And then English is made, primary compulsory subject, and of course, other languages are also offered nowadays, including Mandarin, Vietnamese, Japanese, maybe learned as well as used, right? French, Japanese, Korean, and so on. Okay, so and there's a demand, right, for these languages, particularly English, so that it enables students hopefully to succeed at higher levels of education, right? And it's definitely recognized foreign languages in the school curriculum. Okay, next. And then we'll talk about some of the pertinent issues that I think may happen or might be happening also in the context of Cambodia. One of those is actually the crowding out, right, in the curriculum for other languages. Let's say you have Khmer and then you want to learn English, right? So what about the ecological spaces for other languages, right? And then, and if we accept more languages, then where do we stop? Do we accept all languages? How many languages can you learn? We have capacity limitation in terms of teachers, teacher education, resources, and also human capacity and so on. So there's a crowding out a phenomenon happening, right? This scenario is happening, and then there's a dilemma, right? And which language to learn, right? How long, how many languages, and so on. And then should all be part of the curriculum, right? And also ideological contestations, like I mentioned just now. So we have to manage this kind of situation. And of course, English tends to displace spaces for other languages in the curriculum. Okay, I've mentioned the two fallacies, and we have this kind of thing called parentocracy, as in like parents are the ones who are mainly driving this kind of discourses, yeah, for more English, for maybe Mandarin to be included as an additional language, and they push for more English language periods, English medium of English as a medium of instruction, and so on. So it's the parents who are the key drivers, right? Not only national governments or teachers, but the parents are now playing an instrumental role But the last one is very important. I'll highlight this. I think there are other very, very crucial factors which are often overlooked or not mentioned as much, right? But these are equally important, if not more pertinent, right? We have equity issues, right? We have quality issues, resource deficiency, right? Teacher training, teacher education issues, right? And then disparities in terms of funding and also geographical areas, okay? And then as well as all kinds of other issues related to quality, access, right, and equity, right? So next, I think all those issues should be highlighted and should be addressed, right, to ensure a more successful implementation of foreign language education in Cambodia. So, and I highlight that because I think there is a need to look at the analysis of demographics, right, in Cambodia. So we can see that the population in Cambodia is fairly young, if not very young, right? So a large majority are actually below 30 years old, right? In fact, almost 70%. Okay. So, but if you look at the rural and urban gap, right, rural-urban disparity based on this Britannica pie chart in 2019, so you can see that more than 60% are still based in rural areas. Okay, so what I can say here is that education, that's why it's such an important tool. Okay, for some people, okay, to maintain the dominance, right? Particularly among the elites or selected group of people. So sometimes, they'll push for English, right? Because it kind of reproduces linguistic and social economic disparities or inequalities, right? So, and when you look at that, you'll find that normally, language and education policies tend to benefit certain segments of society, and usually they are in the urban centers, and the voices are louder, okay, and the policies tend to be implemented, okay, and this is common in most countries, not only unique to Cambodia. It's just something that we have to bear in mind, okay. And next. Next, we look at a few other highlighted issues I've mentioned. I think it's embedded in what I have discussed earlier, a concept called linguistic imperialism, or an ideology, I would say. So it's like, a kind of new colonialism, but through language, okay? So primarily through English, but perhaps you can also see remnants of that, in other languages as well. And then there's a danger. I find out that some Cambodians may be concerned about what we call, foreign invasion, quote unquote, foreignization of Cambodian values when you start learning more of foreign languages. So these are certain things to be aware about. And then, of course, a dilution of identities, right? If we over reliance, particularly on English and increasingly Mandarin. So, what about your own linguistic identity and your own local identity? Okay, so I think these are some of the things that we have to juggle with, but these issues are also happening in other countries. Okay, thank you. Next, any more? I think we have a few more slides and then we'll finish there. So just as a way forward, I think basically Cambodian societies and the government, they adopt kind of like what I call a language as resource orientation. So in other words, they view languages as resources. So the more we learn of a language, the better it is. We do not really stop or hinder anyone from learning additional languages. In fact, there is a kind of encouragement, right, on a personal level, as parental as well as governmental level, to learn more languages which are important, which are useful, both as a tool for instrumental value and also for sentimental values. So that's why I put linguistic instrumentalism. And I think Cambodian people are quite pragmatic in the sense that, they'll just adapt along the way. If we need to learn another foreign language, why not? Let's try, let's give it a go, let's go ahead, instead of really, really questioning too much about it. So because I think there is this Cambodian proverb that I have found out, and I think language policy and planning in Cambodia also subscribes to this kind of proverb, in the sense that fear not the future and weep not for the past. So, we don't care what's going to happen in the future, and then we don't want to look back at the past. So we just do what we can, and we try our very best, to make sure that we have the best future, So, and if we need languages, we need to equip ourselves with as many languages as possible, particularly English and not only Khmer and so on. I think in terms of language policy, Khmers in general also subscribe to this proverb. Okay, next. I think this I will just touch a little bit. It may not be really my area, but I think it is interesting to also look at how fluid, or how flexible language policy is in Cambodian context, which is unique. You rarely see this in the rest of Southeast Asia because yeah, I've done research in different countries within Southeast Asia as well. So you'll find that Cambodian government kind of adopted a new kind of approach in its language education policy planning and development, which is called a consultation-based system. So they basically consulted with the stakeholders, to see what they need, what are the needs, what are the demands, and what are the expectations of the education stakeholders. And then they decide on the respective foreign language education content and curriculum, okay? And they have the liberty and they have the freedom to do it. So I say that, it's really good. They are given the autonomy as long as they can reach a consensus, right, among the stakeholders. So it can have different kind of policies and curriculum at different higher level institutions. So, and this is quoted from Chan and Choi in 2020. Okay, so I think this is important, and maybe this can be explored further. So I just say that it is very fluid, in not only in terms of the language planning process, but also in the implementation of the language policy, particularly at higher education. Okay, next. Yeah, we'll touch a little bit on current efforts when we move forward. And I mentioned just now that Cambodia is slowly but surely moving towards multilingual education because they are well aware of the importance of mother tongue based multilingual education, which is also my area. I think this Dr. Hang Chon Naron, okay, mentioned something like that, and then to address these issues in the development of orthographies, curriculum, and learning materials of 6 indigenous languages. Particularly, more importantly, to enhance and quality of this kind of multilingual education and to establish a center of expertise, right? And UNESCO also uses the Cambodian model, and many other researchers and scholars are actually doing research on Cambodian indigenous education in the context of multilingual education at primary level or foundational levels of education. And I think Cambodia is doing very well in terms of teacher training and so on, and framing a curriculum towards multilingual education, which is very good, because as we know in SLA research, the first language actually helps or assists the development of the second language or the third language and so on. So kudos to the Cambodian government and the people of Cambodia. Last but not least, we move on to, I think it's the last slide. So I just have some suggestions and recommendations, which are already, happening in the Cambodian context, I'm sure. I think there is a need to think global, at the same time act locally. Okay, so because context really matters, so we can't just take things from another country wholesale, and then think that if it works in another place, then it should work in our own country. I think it doesn't necessarily work that way, right? And then, of course, there's a shift towards technology-assisted language learning, particularly more so in the post-pandemic world. And we still see issues of inequalities in Cambodian education system, and I think these issues need to be addressed, right? Before we see better outcomes, better educational results, right? And then we have to train local curriculum developers, because or else there'll be an over-reliance on foreign partners, on international donors, and then the programs may not be sustainable, right? And then the scalability is also in doubt, right? If we do not train our local staff, right, to be able to adapt and adopt to the various changes in the world today. And of course, I mentioned earlier, there should be a stronger emphasis on mother tongue-based multilingual education, because that really helps, right, students for their personal and also societal development. And then you can consider Navarine or Navarina multilingual policy models, which is my own study. NA means a national language plus vernacular language, as well as IN will be international language. It can be any language, not necessarily English. And then Navarina will be an A at the back, which is an ASEAN neighboring language, if possible. So it's no longer just one language, two languages. It could have been more, okay, to really benefit and to balance all the various ideologies, which are at times competing ideologies, okay? But what I'm saying is that you can also exist kind of harmoniously within the curriculum and within the ecology. So I think, yeah, all these issues, of course, I mentioned equity, quality issues should be paramount. That should be taken into consideration, because without addressing that, it's harder for to move on to the rest of the issues. Last but not least, we conclude by saying that I think Cambodians should look at language learning in general, or language education as something positive, because you can use these languages as capital, because the more languages you use, actually they're all part of your linguistic repertoire. So, and you can tap into those languages that you have learned, not necessarily now, it could be in the future. And then, you don't know when that will kind of benefits you socially, politically, economically, in terms of education, culturally, and so on. So be positive, right? And then multilingual education and multilingualism are actually a norm, right, in many societies. And then we should highlight, right, multilingualism as resources, which is my research area. It is never easy to balance all these, ideologies, and of course for policymakers it's even tougher. But somebody has to do it. So if you want to do it, then I would say better make or implement and execute policies in a responsible manner, ethical, be inclusive, right, and possible more democratic language policies should be the way forward. And one way to do that is to include and ensure more languages are part of, are given spaces, right, ecological spaces within the curriculum. I think I will end there. Thank you very much, which is my last slide. Thank you again to the organizers for giving me the opportunity to represent my university to present the seminar for Cambodia Education Forum. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much for the presentation, Dr. Lee. Very interesting, engaging presentation. I learned a lot, even though I'm a Cambodian. Some of the information there I don't know. So yeah, it's the power of research now that researcher, when you conduct research, you know more than, even though those who are living in Cambodia. So now we open the floor for Q&A, question and answer. Anybody have question or comment or anything, please, you can unmute and ask your question, or if you're shy, you can write down your question in the chat. Then I will, read your question to the speaker. Thank you. So please, you can raise your hand or you can just unmute and ask question.
I think we can have the slides back on in case anybody wants
Yeah.
At least the first page or something. Yeah.
Wait, let me find the
Okay. Yeah.
slide again.
And you can also type out the questions, because I can see from there as well.
Yeah.
So
Okay, maybe I can start asking one question from the to kick it started. I was interested in the thing that you call fallacy.
Okay.
About early, when you learn English, early is better. Why you think it's a fallacy?
Okay. Very good question. Actually, this is also one of the key elements of my own PhD research, and there's still a lot more for me to learn in this. There are multiple factors when it comes to how we can maximize, earlier is better, to make it an effective strategy in education. But more often than not, it may not necessarily work because earlier is better tends to only work in societies where their first language is already quite strong and well developed. So if the first language is quite strong and well developed, then and the education, in other words, they have very good education systems, and then when they teach a second language, for example, English or Mandarin, then your second language or third language should also be taught with the same intensity, okay, or using the same facilities. You have the same resources as your first language, and then your teachers are also great teachers, well trained with proper curriculum, and then well funded. All the resources are there, and then the students have well developed L1 to assist their L2. And in those kind of situations, that means like in a family, they have also guidance from the family, then maybe earlier can be better. But in most settings around the world, usually the second language or the third language is learned in a setting where there is we don't really have proper teachers teaching. We may not even have enough trained teachers who to teach English. Maybe it's the same in Cambodia, I'm not sure. And then sometimes you have issues when it comes to resources, when it comes to curriculum, when it comes to textbooks. And then of course, those at the rural areas may not have access to this kind of a second language. They do not have the luxury of that. So it's more towards other factors in terms of educational quality and educational equity. So that's why I keep mentioning you have to address those issues first, then earlier is better may work. But without addressing those issues, then you go for earlier is better, it may be counterproductive. Yeah, according to research by Kimmo Kosonen and Kirk-Person and UNESCO and so on. So, and one way to do that is to strengthen the first language. So at least make sure that combined language is well developed. Then you can focus on another language rather than learning too many languages at one time. Sometimes that can also be counterproductive because we need more resources and we need more teachers, and also we need to train the school teachers and so on. So cost is also involved. So education and economics and so on. Okay. Yeah. Just to add a little bit more, earlier is better is also not necessarily true, because sometimes in some contexts, based on research conducted in Sweden as well as other countries, what they have found is that they have looked at the age where people learn a language, and they found out that the earlier they learn a language doesn't necessarily mean that they have a head start over the rest. Sometimes when they learn it when they're 11 years old or 12 years old, they can still learn as good if as those who learn it at 5 years old. So it doesn't mean that they have to learn it at a very, very early age. As I've said earlier, it should be foundational language that is more important. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Excuse me for 1 second. I need to send a file to my colleague here who really need the file. Just wait a bit. So anyone have question, please ask.
Yeah, or any
Yeah.
comments?
Okay, so
And
I
just
would like to
I
ask
will go
some.
back there.
Hello.
Yes, I am
Yeah,
listening.
you can
Yes.
ask. I just change the little.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Patrick, for your insightful talk on language policy in Cambodia. And also thanks for citing one of my papers there that I co-author with Dr. Choi. In fact,
Okay.
Dr. Choi also sent me the links to me last night, and I was surprised because Dr. Kim Kong already contacted me for your talk today.
Okay.
And yeah, it's quite interesting topics, but I have some point that probably I need you to probably extend more. One is regarding
sure.
the title. I think you use the term like language policies with plural forms, and then you come up with underlying ideologies.
Mm,
Honestly, I acknowledge that you have extensive experience on the area, and also I saw a list of your publication on that area. But I'm not sure whether we can narrow it to more specific with the word language policy here, because
okay.
um, through your presentation, I just feel like a bit I don't know. To me, it's a lot probably to discuss. Yeah,
Of course.
in
Yeah.
the papers. That's one thing that I note. And the other thing is you propose of which ideologies,
Mm,
and
mm,
you also outline several concept or variable to be discussion. Um, Um, I'm I'm not sure whether we want to narrow it down and then scope it to some particular area, because you did not
okay.
even mention what levels of language policy you want to investigate. I mean,
Mm, mm,
in education's level, like primary, secondary, or tertiary education, or you want to
mm.
look at the
Okay.
whole
Yeah, yeah. Thank you.
national
Yes.
system level.
Okay.
So
Okay.
yeah, I think this is
No problem.
what I can say, that
Yes.
it's still a very big
Yeah.
scope for me.
Yeah. Thank you.
And
Yes.
the methodology isn't like uh, I did not catch up where you mentioned the methods, how we're
Mm,
going to get all that data and
mm.
interpret it
Okay.
in order
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay. Thank you.
into
Thank you. Thank you,
a deep
Hun Chan.
discussion.
Yes. Thank you so
Yeah,
much. I think we can extend this discussion later on.
sure, sure.
We
I
can
think
we
probably
can
we
further
can
discuss. No problem. Yeah. Yeah.
arrange another
Yes. Sure. Sure.
meeting and
Yes. Yeah.
we
Sure.
have
Sure.
a
Yeah.
discussion. Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah,
Yes. Thank you so much. I mean, first of all, thank you for your comments. Of course, I purposely make it general, in the sense that I looked at the overall education system of Cambodia at primary level, secondary, and tertiary, because I'm not focusing and solely only on one. And of course,
hmm
for real academic context, maybe or for academic
hmm
writing and so on, maybe it has to be focused on one particular area. But that's also because when I talk about this kind of ideologies, I think it exists at all levels of education, and also
hmm
not only in public schools but also private schools. So
hmm
mine is more towards the societal level, and also the understanding of we call it macro policy. So at a national level, and of course, some people look at a micro level. For example, you look at one school or you look at one university,
hmm
right? And you analyze that one in detail, definitely. I mean, I may not necessarily, have the data on one particular aspect, but
hmm
I have, more of the data on the macro aspects, as in like
Okay.
language ideologies, for example. And I purposely put it in a plural form because there are usually three contesting ideologies, usually based
Yeah,
on my
yeah.
research. One is, I just go, briefly. One is the national language ideology. That means
Okay.
people who are more nationalistic, who feels that we should always champion our national agenda, and we should
Mm-hmm.
have our national identity, and our national language is the most important. Okay, so there is this group of people who are always going for that, and they are right, they are not wrong, and usually
Mm-hmm.
they are more nationalistic, and some policymakers or some politicians are also within this scope or within this category. And then another school of thought or another kind of ideology that is common is what we call a vernacular or mother tongue advocate, mother
Right.
tongue ideology, where this group of people, they tend to feel that, yes, regardless of what's happening around the world or even in my
Mm.
country, I need to preserve my own local identity. You know, I need to
Mm-hmm.
have my own identity in terms of language, in terms of culture, you know, or in terms of my roots, right? Because language symbolizes my identity, my roots. And then this group of people, they are kind of worried sometimes that
Mm-hmm.
the learning of other languages may wipe out their identity,
Mm.
you know, or yeah,
Yeah.
or devalue their language and cultures and also their standing in the society, you know. So that
Mm.
is another group, and they are always championing for multilingual education. They are going for mother tongue education, and they feel that that is important alongside other things. And then in other words, language, to learn a language is a right, you know, it's your right to language. And then
Mm-hmm.
that is also sometimes the UNESCO stance. And then the third one is we call it those people who would always embrace globalization and who feel that there is a strong need to go global, you know, to go international, right? A strong need. Covarrubias calls it internationalization. That means I think you probably will be familiar with that also. That means to look at things and to learn another language, because you always have to go global and you go beyond your national shores. And then this group of people will be always championing for English, you know, championing for
Mm.
Mandarin or for another language which is useful
Yep.
beyond, you know, beyond their national boundaries or beyond their national borders. So to go global. So sometimes these three main ideologies, they are at loggerheads, you know, sometimes they are always
Right.
in contestation. But oftentimes
Right.
I think they can also go hand in hand. They can also come to a consensus, as in like through a balancing act, like I mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
So it is
Mm-hmm.
not easy, it is tough, but it can be done. And there should be
Mm-hmm.
spaces for different languages as well, or at least these three groups should at least sit and talk, you know, together. So that's usually what I would propose, you know. But it's definitely a work in progress, you know, for the future as well. But nice chatting with
Right.
you. We can have a follow-up discussion, of course, you know. Thank you. Yeah.
Sure. Sure.
Right. Any other
Yeah.
questions or
One more
comments?
point that I want to mention
Yeah.
is because you
Mm,
also include indigenous language,
mm.
and I think we have different categories or that. Yeah, like you mentioned, vernacular language
Yes,
theories, and it's more related to indigenous language. And I know
yes.
that one researcher already looked into that area in Cambodia at the primary levels. I
I
think
see.
probably
Okay.
1915. Yeah, yeah,
Mm,
and
mm.
so yeah, we can have a follow-up discussion to
Yes,
make it
sure, sure.
more
Thank you. Yeah.
specific on that
Thank you
point.
so much. Yeah, sure, sure. Nice
Yeah,
meeting you. Yeah.
and I think
Mm.
also I have like two other works in the pipeline. Probably also make some comparison in case there's some overlap discussion. I think that should be also a good point.
Okay, sure, sure. No problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, look forward to that.
Okay.
Yes. And of course, you
Okay.
know, for the moderator and also for everyone's benefits, I think I put it generally, as in like language policies. It's also because there are many different languages that we are dealing with, you know,
Mm,
and that's why, you know, I say that there can be a policy for each language, and there can be a policy for that language at different levels. So that's why I use language policies.
Okay,
And of
I
course,
think we
there
have
are many languages as well, indigenous, vernacular, and also foreign languages and Khmer as well.
so we have another person raising their hand.
Okay, Fan
Yeah,
Bora. Yes.
Bora, can you unmute and ask your question?
Yep.
Yes, yeah, good afternoon, Dr. Lee. Yeah,
Yes, good afternoon. Yes. Hello. Yes, you can go ahead. Uh,
Hmm?
Hello.
So,
Sorry.
Bora, you have question or you just want to say hello? Okay, so I think internet connection,
Oh,
he probably we lose him or something. I don't know. Yeah. Any other people who have question, you can please. Okay, so Paul, can you just quickly ask your question? Yeah.
Yeah, good afternoon, Dr. Lee.
yeah. Good afternoon. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation. Okay, I have a question regarding the teacher training. because we know that we do everything in order to make sure that our students have enough ability to survive in the 21st century, especially when they finish their high school.
Okay.
But so could you tell us your, the situation in your country regarding teacher training in your country? Because let's take an example in my context. Teacher training at my school, we need to train them every day, and we need to cross-check their progress every day, every week, monthly, or every, until sometime it takes year in order to make sure that that person is qualified enough to teach. But what about your teacher training in your country? So how can your country, the government in your country, train the teacher and teach student and make sure that the student, after they finish high school, they have enough ability to pursue their higher education?
Okay. So thank you. Sokpal, Sokpal, are you
Yes.
a teacher trainer? Do you train pre-service teachers to become teachers, or are you working at a school?
I work in a private English school.
Okay, so because your question is about teacher training, right? But
Yeah.
you're referring to, but then you refer to how teachers can train students so that they can be good teachers in the future, or are you saying how to train students so that they get equipped with 21st century skills?
Uh, I focus on the how to make sure that students have enough ability to pursue their higher education after they
Okay, all
finish their
right.
high school. Yeah.
Okay. So it's all right. So there are two parts I think to the question. I just quickly answer it. So the first part is teacher training. I think you're right. You know, we guide the teachers every now and then. You know, I was also a teacher trainer. I'm still a teacher trainer. So I train, you know, in service and pre-service teachers as well. So yeah, we can never really guarantee that the teachers will be of the best quality. You know, we can do what we can, because ultimately it's still theory. Unless they go to the field, they experience it on their own. And then of course, like I mentioned in my slide, context matters. So sometimes we have to look at the context also. Like you cannot, you know, equate like you are at a private institution, so you cannot say that private institution is definitely the same as public schools, you know. So and then rural schools will be very different from urban schools or schools in the city. And then so there are this kind of disparities as well. And then you also have situations where you know, changes always happen in the system, and there are lots of reforms, so some teachers are reluctant to change. So I think that is also one issue. You know, teachers are resistant to new things and resistant to changes in life. But you know, the things are happening so quickly, right, in terms of curriculum. But whatever it is, I think first thing is that the teacher himself or herself has to be positive, you know, positive to accept those changes and to keep learning, you know, keep learning, not only in teacher training, but also after that at a school. For, we call it CPD, or continuous professional development. So we do that a lot in Malaysia, and I'm sure we do that a lot in many countries nowadays also. And then to constantly upgrade yourself, right? That's also a reminder to myself. I think that's very important, but also to practice, you know, for practitioners, I think there is such a thing called action research that teachers can do. Um, and also to learn the best practices, you know, of other schools, get other teachers to come and help, have specialist coaches and mentor, mentee. I think these are all very good programs, but of course we cannot go into the details because of time. And then lastly, I just touch a little bit about students, right? You're mentioning how to train students for to prepare them for the real world. You know, the answer is, you know, I may not have all the answers, you know, because that involves, I think, the whole community, the whole society. So it's not just one teacher, but I always believe in you, like Sopal, in your case, I think you can make a difference. So we call it MAD, MAD, you know, so making a difference. So you can make a difference in your own classroom, right? So So at least, you know, we try our best. And of course, usually they involve 4 C's, right? Usually involve 4 C's: communication skills, and then collaboration. They need to collaborate and learn through group work and so on, presentation and so on. And then the last 2 will be critical and creative thinking skills. So I think if we have these four C's, I think we are able to, you know, train students well. Then at least that prepares them for the 21st century world, right? At least those 4 are also part of the elements of 21st century pedagogy. And I think through English or through any language that you teach, I think these 4 skills can be embedded, right? And it's an ongoing process. And I believe students will continue learning in higher education and so on, because, you know, these skills are soft skills and they cannot be mastered in just one day. You know, Rome wasn't built in a day. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank
so
you for the answer.
Yeah, I hope that answers the question. Sorry, it's a lot to answer.
We're running out of time. Can we have one
Mm.
last question before we can
Yeah.
finish this? Yeah. Anyone have question? One last question, please. Yeah.
Yeah, anyone, you know, you can wrap up. And you can also email me if you have anything extra, you know, to note. Yeah. Oh, okay. There's some more.
Okay. let's go
Okay,
ahead.
good afternoon, Dr. Lee.
Yeah,
Can you
good
hear me?
afternoon. Yes, I can hear you
Yes,
loud and
I'm
clear.
Vishnu from Cambodia. And very interesting for your presentation. And I would have
Thank you.
a question regarding to the curriculum analysis. You talk much regarding to the curriculum of Cambodian education and comparing to your national curriculum. What is your perception on the difference between the curriculum between Cambodian and your country, and how do you analyze?
All right, thank you. I think I'll just answer, you know, short. Just give a short or brief answer, because, you know, I don't really know. I don't really know too much about the Cambodian curriculum. Of course, you know, all of you are experts there. Regarding my own curriculum, I can only speak a little bit about English, because I'm mostly focused on English, and I may not know as much about other languages. Well, I can say that basically the issues, I can touch a little bit on issues, is that normally the curriculum that are prepared for students are usually a bit too high, you know, for the students. So, and usually, as I mentioned, it kind of benefits those in the urban areas and those who go for tuition outside, those who go for private tutoring, shadow education, we call it, and those who have better access, you know, through their families, and we call it the well-to-do families and so on. So I think that creates a disparity, right? So I think there is a need, yeah, to contextualize, you know, make sure that our curriculum content is suitable for our own students, to contextualize it, and also, if possible, personalize it, make it more personal, relate to the students' interests, the students' hobbies, you know, the students' geographical areas, and so on. I think that is more important. And then, if possible, lower the level of the curriculum, and relate it, match it with the students' proficiency level. I think without doing that, the students might switch off because the level is way too high for them. So I think that's all I can say, but I think that applies to other countries as well, including my own country. Yeah. Sorry if I have not shared that much.
Okay, so thank you very much. Since the time is up, I'd like to finish it here. Even though people have questions, please, maybe you can drop your question in Telegram group, and then I will convey the question to the speaker, and the speaker answer. I will share the answer with all of you, because now it's 2 o'clock and people here need to start working at 2 o'clock. Yeah. So thank you very much, everyone. We got a lot of people joining us today, and thank you, Dr. Lee, for sharing your insightful presentation on language education in Cambodia. So I hope in the future we will engage you once again. Maybe you can present on your own paper that you have published, or anything that you would like to share with us. So thank you very much, and thank you, everyone. Please have a good day and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you. Yeah, everyone. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah,
Thank
yeah.
you
Thank
very
you
much.
all. Yeah, yeah.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very
Bye.
much, Dr. Lee.
Yeah. Thank you. Very
Thank you.
engaging. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you and goodbye.